Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's edition of HR Mentorship Learning Series. My name is Oluyemi Adeosun, and tonight we'll be looking at a topic, due diligence on workforce, understanding people, risk, and value in transactions. I'm very excited. Our facilitator for tonight is Sandra Chidima Unwalutu, and I'd like to read her profile. Our first time on this platform, definitely not the last time. Sandra is a licensed HR professional with over 12 years experience. She's a member of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management of Nigeria, member of the Nigerian Institute of Management, as well as a member of the Nigerian Institute of Training and Development. Sandra is known for her structured, people-centered, result-driven approach with a strong passion for building high-performance team. Ladies and gentlemen, she has over 12 years experience that spans across HR administration, IT coordination, organizational development in both public and also the private sector. She holds a master's degree in business administration, and she serves currently as the head of human resources, IT, and administration at FGN Power Company Limited, where she supports the delivery of strategic workforce initiatives. As a HR generalist, Sandra brings strong expertise in change management, policy and SOP development, personal performance management, succession planning, expatriate management, and HR governance. She has worked closely with C-suite executive and multidisciplinary teams to drive organizational effectiveness, compliance, and sustainable people practice. Speaking to us tonight on the topic due diligence on workforce, let's welcome Sandra Onwalutu. Over to you, ma'am.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Please confirm you can hear me before
Yes,
I
we
go
can.
on.
Yes, we
You
can.
can. Excellent. Excellent. So, like Dr. Adeosho has shared, I'll be speaking on due diligence on workforce. I must confess, while putting my slides together, it was also a learning curve for me. I'll be sharing some of my experience as well as some of the things which I also recently learned while putting this slide together. Without a doubt, I'm quite certain that this would be um, a learning experience for all of us, and we'll definitely have a few points to take from this session. So without wasting much time, let's delve into it. So first I have here is, slides in a moment. I'll be starting with what is due diligence on workforce. It's important that we're able to glean insight into what it is. Because as HR professionals, once we hear due diligence, our first thoughts would likely lean towards employee background check, ensuring you carry out due diligence on whoever you're bringing on board your team. However, due diligence on workforce spans across just a single individual. So I have put down here that it is a structured assessment of an organization's workforce conducted to identify one, people-related risk, liabilities, compliance gaps, and operational issues in compliance with the Nigerian labor law. So I'm very careful to include the Nigerian labor law because I believe there are people outside of Nigeria who might be tuned into this session. Compliance in HR is a very big issue. Oftentimes, due diligence is carried out by an acquiring or investing entity on a target company. So why are these concepts coming up? So usually we are quite familiar with mergers and acquisition, right? So when it comes to acquisition, there's usually or mergers, you have the acquiring company and you have the target company. So the acquiring company is the organization that is purchasing the other, and the target company is the company being acquired. So that being said, let's move on. What's the objective of due diligence on workforce? The objective, like I've earlier shared, is usually to uncover potential risk, liabilities, and integration challenges. Technology has become a leverage to deepen business integration and collaboration across the world. So before now, we would say that the world is a global village, but more than ever, due to the internet connectivity, technology, and the need for collaboration, and Africa in particular being a continent of interest to the Western world, we have seen a spike in acquisition, in investments across different continents, Asia, America, Europe, being fully vested in Africa. So the idea that I work in a small firm, I don't work in a fintech or a unicorn, I'm not in oil and gas, why should I be concerned about due diligence on workforce? I do not think that anyone is coming to invest or buy us over anytime soon. In the coming slide, we'll see why HR should be invested in due diligence beyond acquisitions. So why does workforce due diligence matter? One, people cost and risk materially affect transaction outcomes. Oftentimes, where there's going to be an acquisition, people are more workforce due diligence. I was speaking to why workforce due diligence matter, and I talked about how people cost and risk materially affect transaction outcomes. I had said that oftentimes most organizations are focused on legal reviews, they are focused on the numbers, they're looking at financial exposures, but much attention is usually not paid to the workforce. Oftentimes, we have seen that in the short term and even to the long term, where there is a misalignment and lack of integration, these acquisitions or these investments or buyovers usually do not attain the potential for which they were initially bought over. Second, I have here is financial due diligence alone does not reveal workforce liabilities. I just spoke to that. Talent, culture, and leadership community are critical to value preservation. One of the essence of having to buy a company over is usually for value preservation, sometimes for market expansion, and then sometimes for new products, new innovative products being brought into the market, right? Fourthly, I have here is it mitigates reputational and operational exposure. You will quite agree that all 4 points listed out here matters not just to HR, but the company as a whole. Next slide. Is my slide changing? So like I earlier shared, I took time to put a little note on the difference between workforce due diligence and employee due diligence. Because like I mentioned, oftentimes as HR professional, when we speak to due diligence, our mind goes to background check. But however, for the purpose of this session, I took out time to look at different aspects to which we can quickly compare workforce due diligence and employee background check or due diligence. So scope and depth. For the employee background, we are looking at an individual employee, ensuring that information provided matches actual. But for workforce due diligence, we're having a holistic company-wide review of the workforce, including structure, compliance, people-related risk for strategic decision-making. But for employee background, we are trying to eliminate employment risk, right? What is the purpose? We're ensuring that the employee is able to, provide the required competence based on the CV and other information provided, right? But for workforce due diligence, we are ensuring that whatever exposure, whether reputational, whether legal, Is it material enough to impact on the intended transaction? So you see, one is weightier than the other. I'll quickly skip the rest. But so what is the intended outcome, right? Hiring decision. One is for hiring decision, one is for decision making, right? So usually when we do an employee background, we put in the contract that if the findings of our background check does not match with the information provided, the company reserves the right to terminate the contract. But for workforce due diligence, we are looking to get insights that would mitigate risk and also give basis for senior executive decision makers to say, should we move forward with this transaction? Should we come back or should we find a common ground, right? So we're moving on to the next slide. I tried to take a look at recent acquisitions and mergers. So we have seen a lot happen, especially in Nigeria, in the oil and gas sector, as well as the banking sector as well, even FMCG. I recall that when Tolaram Group bought over the Guinness Nigeria Diego stakes. It was all over the news. And then that's where we began to get feedback to say, oh, foreign investors are exiting the country, and what will happen to their workforce? What would happen to their assets? Before the current administration, the previous administration had been pushing to say, oh, they want to make ease Nigerian index of ease of doing business really high. And then there was a lot of effort in that agenda. We kept saying, oh, the ease of doing business in Nigeria is really good. It was a strategy to, get in foreign investors. But in 2024, 2025, we saw that a lot of foreign investors were trying to, divest some of their interest in Nigeria. And one of that was the Tolaram group. We also saw Providence Bank merging with Unity Bank. And in 2023 and 2024, Access Pensions and AR Pensions did come together to form the Access AR Pensions. I know that because I followed that closely because I use one of these PFAs. All right, so these are some of the most recent examples, and we have a lot of acquisition happening already in 2026 from the fintech. So if you pay attention to it, you will see that the business entities in Nigeria are moving fast. And it's usually collaboration over competition. People are acquiring, people are merging to just ensure that they are able to expand while maintaining their share as maintaining their market share. Okay, so we're moving on. Why should HR prioritize due diligence beyond mergers and acquisition? So I talked earlier about trying to be strategic as HR professionals, right? We need to be proactive because my first thought when I started putting this slide together is how would I come across to someone who probably works in a small business, maybe owned by a sole proprietor that is just trying to scale? How would this bring value to someone who is probably mid-level in a small business that has no branches anywhere? They are not in fintech, they are not in oil and gas. So I decided to include this particular slide to say, beyond mergers and acquisition, as HRs, positioning ourselves for strategic restructuring, whether we are positioning to be acquired by bigger firms, or we just want to be sure that at every point in time we are ready to scale as a company, this slide would be of good interest. So one, why should you prioritize due diligence? Of course, risk management and legal compliance, right? Like I mentioned before, compliance is a big deal. So I mentioned here that we need to prevent lawsuits. I have a friend that worked in the Nigerian Industrial Court, and we're having a chit chat. And he told me I would be shocked that as recent as 2025, you still have employers who would deduct taxes and pensions from their employees' salaries and would not remit. right? It is at the point of the employee exiting the firm, they will begin to ask for proof of remittance. And when the employer is unable to provide these proofs, they go straight to file a lawsuit against the employer, right? So why should we be strategic in ensuring due diligence? It is our role as HR to advise our employer to help prevent any form of labor law violation, whether it is in our contract terms or whether it is in remittance of statutory deductions. We need to ensure that we are up to date with our remittances and aligned with the Nigerian labor law at the bare minimum, right? Auditing documentation. We need to ensure we have employee contracts. We need to ensure that it aligns with the Nigerian labor law. We need to also ensure that whatever is contained.
You are giving somebody tough time. You don't scatter everything finish. First, you don't know what you want to do again.
We need to ensure that we have our documentation up to date. So for instance, with statutory deductions, we know that when you remit your pension, you have your certificate of compliance. And usually these should be processed immediately once we come into the preceding year against in the succeeding year against the preceding year. So once we are able to ensure that we are able to cover ground, even unionization, because we know the impact of unionism in a workplace. We want to be sure that whatever agreements we have with the union leaders, we keep them to avoid disruption of operations in the workplace, right? We also want to ensure how do we employee data, how are they protected? Because sometimes I had an incident where there was a leak on an employee medical record. And how did that happen? The clinic that was supposed to carry out medicals for this employee emailed a wrong person in the company. And instead of this person sharing it directly to HR, this person waited till there was a general staff meeting. And this person says, oh, I received the medical report for Mr. So and so. I don't know why it was shared with me. What do you want me to do with it? Thankfully, this person was not present at that meeting, right? If it were a workplace where people were very, very concerned or very careful about what people said about them, the employee could have filed for a lawsuit because that was a breach of his privacy. But I was quickly able to manage that conversation and tender an unreserved apology. I am saying all of this to speak to risk management and legal compliance, because legal compliance is multifaceted in HR, right? Secondly, is internal restructuring and growth. We are now in the AI era, and there is a lot of restructuring happening. AI is giving us efficiency. A team of 5 now can be scaled down to a team of 2 because AI gives that support. And usually businesses that would typically not want to expand due to cost overhead can now do so because AI gives some level of speed and some level of technical advisory, provided you know how to input the right prompts. So another reason why we should consider due diligence beyond acquisition as HR, whether your company is a one-man business or is just in one location, is your MD might be preparing for an expansion and you really don't know. Your MD might be preparing to go public. You might not know. Internal reorganization due to restructuring, like I said, it helps you identify redundant roles. It helps you identify where you have duplication of efforts because one person is doing something, another person is doing something, but they have different job titles, right? Also, talent mapping. You want to identify what your talent pipeline look like, what the skill set available within the workforce looks like, and how they align to the overall strategic objective of your organization. Financial optimization, of course. We also have cultural alignment and preparing for future investments. Some of all of these speaks to why we should be proactive. We do not have to wait till we have investors come around. Personally, after I had put this slide together, I said, I think I want to do this on an annual basis. Just have a due diligence at the last quarter of every year to see where we are and where we are headed. And this way, we're able to provide advisory to senior executive to say, following this due diligence, we've been able to uncover XYZ. We've been able to see we can scale down on this role. We've been able to see we've not been compliant in this aspect. And now we have different laws that have been changing. For instance, the tax law that has just changed. I was speaking to a friend earlier this week, and she talked about how they were just struggling to be compliant with the new tax law as it impacts on their staff members. Again, once we're able to do diligence on time, we're able to give advisory to management to say, okay, we do not think that we will be compliant if we do not have our finance team and our HR team trained on this new tax law, so they know how to communicate to the larger workforce and they know how to implement it on employee salaries, right? Also, cultural alignment. One of my friends that worked in one of the PFAs, which I mentioned earlier. So I was speaking to him, what was your experience during the merger? And he said, oh, they were not really talking to them, but that the conversation happened at the top, but what they had after it was concluded were mostly town hall meetings. That although the town hall meeting was helpful to some extent, it would have been better if they were carried along. Cultural alignment plays a very big role in how successful, whether an acquisition or whether a merger would be in the long term and in the short term. I'll speak to that much later as I progress. And finally, it's preparing for future investment or exit. Like we know, businesses are in phases, and sometimes businesses are set up not with continuity in mind. They usually have a time frame. So if your entity falls in one of those that is like a special purpose vehicle that was created for a particular time frame, it is important to carry out due diligence periodically, because this report would shape how you're able to exit the market or how you are able to be ready for an acquisition or a merger. So moving on, what is the scope of due diligence on workforce? This list is not exhaustive, but for the purpose of this session, I'll be sticking to HR policies and practices, talent profile, compliance with labor law, compensation, and benefits. What is the importance of due diligence? I've shared some of these earlier. However, I'll speak to this in two phases, as value drivers and risk mitigation. When we talk about risk, we talk about identifying them before they crystallize, right? So when we carry out due diligence, it acts as a mitigant against whatever identified risk before they crystallize, right? So one, it reduces the risk of loss of critical talents. We know that in every team, there are usually the results-driven employee, those who bring initiative, those who are result-oriented. However, when a company undergoes whether restructuring, whether they go through an acquisition, whether they go through, a buyover from a larger firm, if that process is not properly managed, there can be loss of critical talent. And the long-term impact is that once these people gradually exit the company, either because they feel they were not properly onboarded or they feel that their interests are no longer protected, the bottom line would be impacted. And so that's why in my opening statement, I mentioned that the financial review is not sufficient enough to give insight to the human risk involved in some of these restructuring or acquisitions. Next is identify high turnover risk. If you carry out a due diligence on a company you want to buy and the number shows that they have high attrition, you want to find out why. What are they doing wrong that could be corrected? Would this be material to the transaction, or is it what can be quickly nipped in the bud before the transaction or after the transaction, right? There's also internal conflicts arising from different management style. We like to say that success and failure rises on management, right? We want to say that management style is very key to how a company succeeds. We want to see what can we do? Do we need to see that the leaders in these entities go for some sort of leadership training? Do we want to see that the contract for these people are terminated and not, not renewed, either because of how the internal conflict and internal fighting has hindered productivity? All right, we also want to talk about, as a risk mitigant, spotting early identification of work-related liabilities. Do we have severance we have not paid to employees? Do we have overtimes? Do we have unremitted statutory deductions? Do we even have unpaid salaries, right? Also, we even need to look, do we have contracts with some? It will shock you to know that some entities in 2026 would not give employee contracts. I was shocked when I learned about that. And I was asking, how do you hire people without giving them contracts, right? So sometimes carrying out due diligence, every time we carry out due diligence, we're able to identify these risk, workforce related liabilities from the onset. Now, speaking to value drivers, what are the value that we can get from carrying out workforce due diligence? Of course, we would optimize our human capital, ensuring enhanced productivity and operational efficiency. And this is particularly true when two companies who are in the same business or who were prior, maybe competitors, decide to come together, or one decides to buy one over. The value proposition here is that they are able to immediately enhance productivity, increase their market share, and operational efficiency, provided that the workforce due diligence is done properly, right? Next is to strengthen organizational culture. Culture is really, really big. I was speaking to my friend and he shared that in one of the PFAs, they don't usually wear native attire. They're usually on suits, corporate wears, Monday to Friday. But during the merger, they have to talk about how they need to incorporate, wearing native Nigerian attire, because one of those entities was very big on it, because most of their clients were public sector, were MDAs, and there was no way they would go to an MDA wearing suits. So they had to find a common ground. So the common ground was every Thursday and Friday, employees are now allowed to wear native attire. So cultural alignment is very, very key, right? So cultural alignment, communication channels, are we big on hierarchy? Are we able to address people on first name? Do we have an open door policy where we're able to easily assess our executive? What does leadership really look like in each entity? It's very important, all right? Next is that we're able to support effective talent integration and leadership alignment. We're also able to enhance long-term value creation through retention of high-performing employees. If there is any goal of workforce due diligence, of utmost importance is to ensure that the high-performing employees and those with critical competence, which is required for the success of the business, are retained. You know why? Because if they do not have a seamless onboarding into whether it's acquisition, whether it's merger, and they leave, the first goal of the HR, instead of trying to build capacity, they'll start focusing on recruitment, right? And whoever you're bringing in will probably have, at the minimum, maybe a 2 weeks or a 4 week notice period. And then you want to start doing onboarding. Now, add recruitment onboarding to an acquisition that has just been, concluded, where employee morale is still low. They really do not know their fate. They do not know where they are going to. It will be too much disruption to at the workplace. It will be too much disruption to workflow. So when due diligence is done right, one of the first indicators is that high performing and critical employees are retained. They do not go anywhere. All right. And finally, as a value driver, workforce due diligence ensures that transaction and investor confidence is boosted, so that once the investor sees the number, sees the report, they know they are not going into this transaction blindsided. They have the information, they are making the right decisions, and they are very sure of the expected outcome. Next slide. So I did a little research on what are the success and failure rates. I looked at Forbes, I looked at CFA Institute, and I also looked at the scientific research. So the research showed that although there were success rates with mergers and acquisition, however, studies suggest that a significant portion do not deliver unexpected value. Why? Because the failure rate is usually above 70. That although some go above and beyond to increase their market share and increase in their value creation, but however, above 70% are not able to achieve their intended objective for going into that transaction. And what was the reason? It showed that there was integration challenge, there was cultural mismatch, there was insufficient due diligence, and there was strategic misalignment. And all of this boils down to the human component of business. Because regardless of whatever technology we're able to invent, at the core would be humans to drive it. So where there is no strategic alignment among the leadership on their strategic objectives, whether short-term or long-term, where there's a cultural mismatch, as simple as how should we be addressed, or leadership style, or how we should even dress, right? Or should we work full-time? Do we want to bring a hybrid approach? Do we want to continue fully remote? As simple as these indicators are, it could lead to failures of these mergers and acquisition. So that is why during the workforce due diligence, it is important I created a checklist to go through each line item so that there are no gray areas, so that there are no assumptions. Because what happens is when there are unmet expectations due to assumptions or due to the acquiring company coming with their policies, coming with their culture, if it is not well accepted, the misalignment will show in a matter of time. Because what would happen would be that people would just be placeholders. They would remain there as long as they can get a new role. So they are there, but they are actively searching. And before you know it, they would exit. And then gradually you begin to see that your workforce that had compelled you to take over the company or to acquire them, you begin to wonder, why are we having key members leaving? And sometimes it might just be a simple, oh, I do not think I am able to get sufficient work-life balance here. We had assumed we'll continue with our hybrid mode. We never did 5 days a week. All right, so moving on. How do we conduct workforce due diligence? So I have listed 7. Firstly, planning and scoping. Of course, if you're a student of project management, right? The first thing you hear is planning and scoping. Secondly is data and document collection. Thirdly is review and compliance analysis. Fourthly is risk assessment. Fifthly is conduct management interviews. 6th is reporting, and 7 is remediation. I'll be speaking to this shortly. So what is planning and scoping? Of course, as it implies, scoping is we are trying to put a boundary. To what extent do we want to go? What are the variables we should be considering, and how do we go about them? So when we speak to agreeing on scoping and setting scope boundaries, we are looking at what are the workforce we should consider. Should we consider just the senior executive? Should we consider the entire workforce? If we're going to carry out due diligence on the entire workforce, there is need to categorize them. All right. How do we ensure that we are able to identify the key people we want to speak with? All right. What are the timelines that will be spent on each phase of this exercise? And when will be our turnaround time to give management the report? Because they also need the report to carry on or to decline moving on with the transaction. All right. Next is data and document collation. Since 2020, 2019, HR has been about HR and data, data optimization, data cleansing, how we're able to create HR dashboard and all of those. All right. So definitely you want to start with your nominal role or the employee master list. You want to look at the organogram. You want to look at the contract. What are the types of contracts? What does their probationary period look like? All right, what is their payroll data? What is their most recent payroll available? What is their compensation structure? You want to look out for discrepancy in what was offered and what is actually being paid, right? Someone was sharing recently that they had agreed on salary. Coming on board at the end of the month, what was gotten was different than actual. And before you know it, someone will be going to industrial court or someone will be suing to say, this was not our agreement, all right? We also want to review HR policies, employee handbook. You just want to look at the governance around policies and practice. We want to see what the dispute resolution framework looks like. You want to look at grievances. We also want to look at what are the evidence that they are compliant. So I'm speaking to number 3, review and compliance analysis. All right. Assess employee documentation for consistency and enforceability. I know that several times on this mentorship session, a lot of the speakers have spoken to documentation, how we can leverage technology and how we need to move from just being an HR administration to being big on documentation, pulling data, and providing advisory. All right. We also need to review compliance with labor law, with tax law, with pension and statutory organization. And all of this information is resident with HR. So if one day your employer wakes up and say, oh, I've gotten an investor that intends to buy us over, we need to quickly provide this information because we are strategic and because we need to be ready just in case of a restructuring, or we want to ensure that we're able to provide the right advisory to our employer. All of this information should be available. We want to have a note on the gaps we have identified between policy, between practice, and other legal requirements. And of course, we need to do periodic benchmarking, not only on salary, but also want to look at benchmarking on our eligibility criteria for the different roles as we carry on recruitment and we build our talent pipeline. We also want to ensure that risk assessment is carried on. So of course, as HR, there is need for us to have our risk register, right? Because your risk register is a pointer. What does your risk register do when you carry out your risk assessment? It points to you to what is high risk, what is medium risk, and what is your low risk? What is the severity? What is the likelihood that that risk would crystallize? And what are the mitigants you need to put in place? So this is what the risk assessment is speaking to. So usually when you conduct your due diligence, you want to see how material is this risk. So for instance, if you have your employee workforce not complying with laid down policies or specific laid down policies. So, for instance, there is repeated late resumption. Would that be material to impacting on the transaction? All right. What is the severity of late coming? For instance, would the buying company consider providing maybe a staff bus? Would they consider reviewing resumption and closing time? Would they consider a hybrid approach to work? Right? Then we're also looking at categorizing the issues into legal, financial, operational. Yes. So in your risk register, when you carry out a risk assessment, you want to categorize them. You want to look at the severity. I spoke to how we want to ensure what is the likelihood of this happening. Is it theoretical or would it actually happen? Would it have an impact? And if it does, how severe would it be? Would this be a deal breaker or can it be managed? Right? Then we also want to look at industrial risk. Most people into the manufacturing sector would understand that the influence of unionism is very, very key. You do not want to underrate them. You want to look at their log on how much downtime they have had due to industrial action. You want to see what was their past negotiation with the union. Have they kept to it? And what has been the impact on operations? Because once you come into the business and you do not understand the language or you do not understand how industrial relations has been navigated before, if you just come in and try to do it your own way, the business will suffer because it will be crippled. And we've seen that happen time and time again. We recall the issue of Dangote at Obajana with the residents and the Kogi state government, and the Kogi state government had to intervene. So if it were a new business trying to take that plant over, they definitely want to review, industrial relation and how the business have been able to survive it. Next is to conduct management interviews, of course. I'm sure we're very familiar with board interview, board management, but during due diligence, there's also a need to conduct senior executive interviews. We want to see what our HR leadership, whether it's HR director, chief human resource officer, we want to speak to the CCUs. We want to see what leadership is through the lens of their eye. We also want to, based on data available, see and confirm what they say. Does it align with what is available on the record? We want to validate data and spool out inconsistencies. Because what that does is, if what is being said is different from what is available on the record, is already a red flag. You want to be sure that, again, that the books that has even been provided has not been doctored. Because during interview, a lot of things will come to bear. You want to understand informal practices that are not captured. I was speaking to my friend recently. I said in every workplace, there's the written and the unwritten ones. So once you come into a new workplace, or if you're trying to buy any entity over, whether you want to know what are the unwritten ones, because the unwritten ones, to a large extent, impact employee behaviors in the workplace, right? You want to look at cultural dynamics and employee engagement. As simple as team bonding activity is, I conducted a series of exit interviews. And I kept asking, because I always like to ask, what is the highlight of your stay during your time with us? And to my amazement, not one, not two, they kept saying it was team hangouts, it was team bonding activity. As simple as employee engagement, team dynamics, it can go a long way to mar or to improve seamless onboarding of staff members, whether it be buyovers, whether it be mergers, whether it be just acquisition of assets and maybe key personnel from a different entity. Next is reporting. At the end of this slide, I put a checklist of reports to be prepared by the HR conducting the due diligence. You need to prepare a structured workforce due diligence report. And of course, without saying, you also need to look at your key man risk as part of it. You need to summarize your findings, risk, liabilities, and compliance gap. Are they compliant? Are they big on owing employee salaries or waiting till sometime in the new months before they pay? Do employees find fulfillment on the job? What is the indicators on the index of employee fulfillment on the job? What is your projection based on the past record of attrition rates that the workforce you are meeting now will be in the short term, or do you need to start hiring immediately? All right. And then finally is remediation. What are the steps we should take following our findings? What would be our recommendation to senior management? Are the report of our findings material to the transaction? Would we say we can go on? Would we say we should hold on? Would we say we need to carry out some sort of renegotiation based on our findings? And following our findings, who will be the responsible persons to carry out the execution or implementation? Moving on, this is a checklist of some of the documents to look out for. The employee register. We want to look at the nominal role, of course, employee register or the nominal role. We want to look at contracts. Are they compliant with the labor law? We want to look at the minimum wage. Are they also compliant depending on their size and also their industry? We also want to look at pension and other statutory remittance. We also want to look at expatriate permits. For entities that have expatriates in them, are they compliant? Because sometimes you might have approval to hire for just 4 roles, and then you come and you are saying 10 people, 10 expatriates. You already know there is a non-compliance. You want to check, do they ensure that their SEPAC is renewed at the right time to avoid any sort of issues with the Nigerian immigration? You also want to look at disputes and liabilities identified. Do they have lots of cases logged at the industrial court? Are they at every week at the police station trying to recover their work tools from a disgruntled employee? Are they owing salaries? Are they owing overtime? Are they owing other benefits to the employees who might not be able to speak up? But as you carry out your due diligence, even if it's town hall meetings, some of this feedback would come. And when we're able to collate all of this, we can now decide. So this checklist is not exhaustive, but it gives a pointer to the main areas to focus on. I've also listed out some of the key laws we should look at: the Nigerian labor law, the personal income tax, pension reform, employee compensation, minimum wage, immigration, ITF, which is the Industrial Training Fund, and the Nigerian Social Trust Fund. So depending on your industry, it will give you areas on which of these to focus on. But generally, these are the Nigerian labor laws to consider to ensure compliance, so that you do not work or you do not advise your senior management to walk into a transaction blindsided. Because once there's a misalignment, it would show. And it's just a matter of time. It's a matter of 3 months to 6 months. It will begin to show. As simple as culture, how people are dressed, how people look, even work tools, as simple as work tools. When employees are provided work tools, are they provided laptops? Are they provided phones? Are they allowed to use their personal devices for work? How are they commuting? When they are going for professional engagement, how do they commute? As simple as these feedbacks are, they can impact on employee morale, and this in turn would impact on productivity, right? So I've listed out 8 of the Nigerian labor laws to also consider to guide, HR professionals as they carry out their due diligence. In conclusion, people risk are a major driver of mergers and acquisition failures. Research has shown that many transactions underperform due to workforce issues such as loss of key talent, cultural misalignment, poor integration, and hidden people-related reliability rather than just financial weakness alone. So there might have been the potential, and truly the entity has been doing well. So what happened? Your numbers were good, your figures were good, your profitability was agreed upon. So what happened during the time when the company was acquired and 6 months down the line or 1 year down the line? What has happened? Oftentimes is usually related to people risk, loss of key talent, cultural misalignment. And oftentimes, like I put in my second paragraph, current due diligence practices in Nigeria most of the time is focused on senior management. We do not have time, maybe due to time constraint or due to lack of data, we do not have time to consider the broader workforce. We just have engagements at the top level where the C-suite is engaged, they have their interview, documents are collated, and that's about it. And then maybe when the transaction is done, you can now have, maybe town hall meeting to just get 1 or 2 things. Then the HR brings their own HR policies and say, going forward, this is how we do it here. This is how we do it here. And then when people look like, oh, this doesn't have my interest. I don't think my inputs matters. I do not see how my value here is measured, or I don't think my interest is protected, they leave. So in conclusion, my strong recommendation is that the broader workforce is carried along. The conversation should not stop at the top. There should be town hall meetings, full and proper documentation should be requested, compliance gaps should be identified, risk registers should be drawn up where the HR is able to identify what are material to these transactions, what are not, and how do we navigate them. All right? How do we ensure that these workforce are retained? And how do we improve on their competence? How do we merge cultures to ensure that our output together, which is the power of synergy, is better together than our individual contributions? Finally, a holistic workforce due diligence and approach improves outcomes, expanding the review beyond leadership to include critical roles, workforce structure, culture, and people practices, enables better investments, reduces disruption, and ensures stronger and longer-term value creation. This brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions, any contributions? Please feel free to share. Questions, feedback. Contributions.
This is so beautiful. Any questions for our facilitator? This has been excellent. Excellent session.
Hello, good evening.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Doinsola.
Okay, please, I'd like to thank you for the presentation. I'd like to ask, in a case whereby you found that an employee drops false records about themselves, what do you do?
Please, can you take that again? Hi, doing Shola. Please, can you take that again? I know you said in a
Can
case
you
where
hear
an
me?
employee. Yes,
Can
I
you
can
hear
hear
me
you
now?
now. Yes, I
Yes,
can
I
hear you
said
now.
when you discover that an employee submitted false documents, that's in terms of maybe their details, their address, whatever, during the verification phase, you realize
Right.
they were
Yeah.
majorly false. Maybe
Right.
even the references are no. So what do you do in such cases?
Right. So typically, during the recruitment or the screening exercise, and even in the contract of employment, it is important to state in clear terms that the company would go ahead to conduct a background check on the employee. And where the result contravenes the information already provided by the employee, the employer has reserves the right to terminate the contract, meaning that the information provided has not been provided in good faith. So that already provides a shield for the employer. And this is not only about maybe where they live. Sometimes, even with medical record, sometimes even with their health record, because where I worked before, we were responsible for the medical record. So sometimes they ask employee, go and do a check and bring your results. But where I worked before, we partnered with one of the HMOs. So once you accept our offer, we send you to the clinic. But personally, what I do during the final stages, once you accept the offer, I tell you about our background check. I also tell you about how your data will be used. I tell you straight up that your data would be shared with a third party who is a due diligence company specialist, and it was an arm of a security company. I tell you straight up that we'll be sharing some of your data with this third party who is responsible for verifying all your information, your credentials, your professional membership, your where you live, your guarantors. If you provided guarantors, they will be contacting your guarantors, your referees. If any of the information comes back and do not tally with what has been provided, we have a right to terminate your contract. And usually, okay, yes. Some of them will tell you, give me some time. Or some of them will tell you, oh, if you do my medical check now, you might find XYZ because I'm treating so and so. Because we'll normally test for easily transmittable disease, we'll test for tuberculosis, we'll test for HIV, we'll just test for those things, right? It was not to discriminate against them, but just to be sure that as a duty of care, that the larger workforce is provided. So once you find out, now speaking to answer your question, that your employee has provided false information, proactively you should ensure it is provided in your contract. But if not, how material is this discrepancy in the information provided, right? Again, we want to look at time lag. If I'd provided that I live in, maybe I live in GRA Ikeja, right? During the time you interviewed me, and I gave you those information. And maybe before you concluded the recruitment exercise, I have moved to somewhere in Surulere, or I have moved to Victoria Island, right? And then you use the information at your disposal. You also want to ask what happened. Was it a time lag issue? Right? Is it material to bringing this person on board? If it is material, you want to tell the person. And again, this should be done on time, because if this person has resigned from their previous place of work and they are coming in, all right, it's going to create some sort of inconvenience for this employee. So you want to say, you need to give us time, all right? Once you accept your offer letter, we need 7 days to receive your document so we're able to do our due diligence, right? But please, If before now it is not captured in your contract of employment, you need to have it covered. But however, if it is not covered, you want to look at how material is it to the role the employee is coming to take. Would it lead to operational failure? Would it lead to reputational exposure? Would it put the company in a place of risk? Or is it what can be corrected with time, maybe in 1 month, in 2 months? Is it what can be managed? So I think I would leave you to make the final decision. But that's my take. I don't know if there is any contribution to Doyin's question.
So what happened is I just got an offer in a company, and though they have the caveat in their description and everything in their offer letter that you must, if you provide any false solution, blah blah blah, is there. But I don't think they have a company who runs that, or maybe a verification process, which they did not do. So I just started going through a lot of documents. In fact, I realized that maybe some of their staff members are siblings, but because one of them has changed to a marital name, that's a husband's name, so they don't even know. One even claimed to be living elsewhere, whereas they live together, a lot of things. And I'm now in between telling the organization, or I'm telling the management, or just keeping quiet.
Do you have a policy that do not allow siblings or spouses work
The policy
in your
only,
organization?
no, it's just for spouses, not for siblings. So, and the way they did this thing is, I think they are just trying to be, one of them claimed that they were supposed to be in Abuja, whereas they're actually residents in Lagos, in order to ask for more money. So that was
I think you need to, but you will need facts. You will need facts, because as HR, you need to be able to provide a body of facts. So I don't know how you got that intel, but you might want to request proof of residence. You want to request proof of residence and try to. Most of this security company will do this due diligence for you very quickly. Request proof of residence and try to gather sufficient data. But you need to also give a disclosure for data privacy reasons that you'll be conducting a due diligence. If they pick on it, they might just come forward to say, oh, this was what happened, XYZ, how can we navigate it, right? But because your policy also does not speak to that, makes it a little bit tricky, and it's not just having policy, is the policy also communicated? Right? Has the policy during the onboarding been communicated to them? Is it indicated in their contract of employment that the contract of employment is read alongside the company HR manual? Because if it's not stated anywhere, why do you want to hold me to it? Because even when I ask people for proof of residence, they're asking, oh, why are you asking for it? It's a breach of my privacy. And I just go up front, we do due diligence. We need to know where you live. We need to be sure that, XYZ, and everybody's on the same page. So I've just identified some gaps, but I think you might want to immediately improve your manual. You also want to have clear communication and also build a body of facts. So you're not leaning on just hearsay. You need to build your body of facts. You want to ensure it is backed by policy, and so that you're also not overwhelmed and you're also objective in your findings. You might just want to maybe contract one of these security firms or one of these people that specializes in employee background check to do a quick check for you. Ask the employee for her credentials, the ones she had from school, SSC, NYSC, and if there is a change of name, she will definitely be bringing the proof of change of name as well. So some of all this will add up to your body of evidence. I hope that I've been able to give some guide on how to navigate this.
Thank you very much.
Any other question? Feedback? How did we do? Did we learn anything? What would we do differently? Okay, I think in the absence of any questions, I would stop sharing my screen and I would defer to
Hello,
Dr.
good evening,
Abir.
ma'am.
Oh, hi, good evening.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for coming in 5 minutes. Okay, so my question, because you mentioned onboarding, I hope it's quite related, and so let me just go ahead. If you work in an organization and you are in HR and you're not even given any onboarding of any sort. I mean, of any sort. You come in the company, you don't have an employee handbook. There are no documents written anywhere, anywhere, nothing codified, no policies, nothing. And you're a transitioning professional. You transition from sales to HR. Okay, so you are starting virtually at the bottom as an HRO,
Right.
even though you have years of sales experience. Now you work with HR, and the head of human resources happens to be, I don't want to use the word narcissistic, but I mean, that's what this person bullies you, harasses you. And from the get-go, during your interview, you told them that you've never worked in HR, that you're transitioning, you're completely new, you're fresh, even though you've had experience in sales and all that. And then you come in and this person is harassing you for every single thing. It's a company where you're not onboarded, you're not even shown the ropes. I know an onboarding should consist of meet and greets and some training and all sorts, but you are given nothing, absolutely nothing. Tasks are just, you're not even given the job description and your KPIs. So the first time you're hearing of something, they are throwing you in there, go and get this, go and do that. You're asking, how do I go about it? And she keeps telling you, use your initiative. You don't have sense. We call you unzuzu and all sorts of just literally bullying, harassing. And everyone in the company knows that you're going through this. Now, how do you navigate this? Because this is HR. When things like this happen, they see documents and report to HR, but you are in HR being bullied by your head of human resources. Everyone can see it. Please, what do? You are frustrated. You put in long nights. You're the only one in the office up till 10:40 PM because you just want to get things done, but she never just sees anything good in what you do. I mean, you're asked to prepare a payroll, you have a background in communications, and you're not even taught how to prepare this payroll. But she just tells you, look at what the other payroll, and nobody to put you through. Please, what do you do? How do you go about this thing? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Isa. I mean, I quite appreciate that you took the courage to share. So first off, I'll tell you, I've been in this for a while. First off, just begin to plan your exit strategy, right? There is no need to find a way navigating here. Plan your exit strategy. Brush up your CV, update it. When I worked in consulting, my lead, the head of recruitment then will say, looking for a job is a full-time job. As it stands, I don't think you have a job, because any job that demeans your self-worth, impacts on your mental health, keeps you at the office till 10:40, I don't think that's a job. So first off, come up with an exit strategy. I can review your CV for you for free, right? Secondly, get an HR mentor, which is what we're doing here. But you need a mentor you can speak with, who will give you access, who can handhold you, because you're just starting. We all had those mentors that handheld us, that we can quickly, once they dump something on your table, you can just go on WhatsApp, like, Alpha, beg, like this, what's up, right? AI would help you, but you always need that human component. So get that person, whether within the organization or out of there, even within this HR platform. I'm sure if you put it out there that, oh, you need someone to, guide you through this phase of your career journey, you would have people come through for you. So get someone who can handhold you. Thirdly, you might need to speak to someone more senior than your head of HR, right? But before you do that, you might want to ask your head of HR for a meeting, politely, professionally, but you need to be assertive on your feedback. You need to share with her your concern. You need to let her know that you have never hidden that you are just starting off on this phase of your journey. You would appreciate if she's a little bit more patient, if she's able to provide more guidance, and when you drop the ball, if she's able to give her feedback with some level of, respect, because it is not intentional that you're not able to deliver at this phase. You're just starting off. So you might want to have that conversation. But if there are no changes, right, at this time, you're still looking for a new job, because I've been in such workplaces, they will not change. Even if they change, it's in the short term, maybe 1 week, 2 weeks, and they go back, right? And because, to be honest, in the corporate entity, we bring ageism. You are not really able to give direct feedback if they are older, or if it's someone of a different gender, right? You are not able to give some feedback, maybe gender-based, age-based, ethnicity-based. I work somewhere where I was being told that because I'm Igbo, they know we don't have respect. Out of the blues, I have not done anything, that you don't have respect, you are badly behaved. So firstly, I'm even judged because of my tribe before my competence, right? So I'm giving this feedback, and I hope that you take it. Please develop an exit strategy. Befriend LinkedIn, befriend the job boards, brush up on your CV, right? When I worked in consulting, my boss then would say, looking for a job is a full-time job. Apply for as much as you can find. I don't know your location, but keep sending it out, right? Speak to your manager. Be very polite, be professional, but outline, if you need to sit down and outline your areas of concern, I would appreciate that you speak to me in a less abusive manner. I would appreciate if you give me tasks with a realistic timeline. I would appreciate that you offer me more guidance when you give me tasks assigned. I would also appreciate that you give me support when I share that I am not able to deliver. If she's not able to give you a concrete yes, or find a middle ground, look for someone more senior and escalate. And if none of them is able to give you support, or try to see how they can help, de-escalate this situation, please, you need to intensify your job search. No job is worth your mental health or demeaning your self-esteem. Why? Because when you are soaked in an environment, you do not realize how much of your self-worth you are losing. See, you live there and you go into a structured environment and you begin to ask yourself, who am I? Because you can't fit in. You don't know what structure looks like. You don't know what an objective feedback looks like. You're not able to fit in because you've been used to chaos. So please, I wouldn't advise that you stay long in that environment. No. And during this time, enroll for HR professional courses. Is a good place to boost your network. You can either start joining learning centers, reading up on your own. CIPM is there, SHRM is there. Just get into one of them. You see people who are also starting off like you, and that would boost your morale, because there's always a community for everyone. There's always a community for everyone. I don't know if I've been helpful.
Yes, you've been mighty helpful. Thank you. I'll start to
Please, I want to
act on
ask
some of these things.
sorry, is it a corporate environment or all this informal organization?
It's a corporate environment, very corporate. It's a company into oil services.
Do you, in any way, when you started the job, did you ever appear timid? Because sometimes your appearance also makes people treat you anyhow. When you feel like you do not know what you want to do, if you are appearing proactive and you appear like you know, even when you don't know something, sometimes they say you say nonsense with confidence. So don't show them and make them feel like you are not worthy or capable. Be able to speak out.
No, I think this is a very different issue, because no, it's very different, because it's not like it's my first time working. Like I said, I've had experience in sales and communications, and I've never been this rubbish or someone with, I've never. So it was so strange. And as a matter of fact, I left the place. I was there for 2. I'm just asking so that, to know how I handle this. And should I find myself in another environment, you know what to do. My pain point was that this is HR. Normally, they will tell you report to HR when your supervisor or your boss, your line manager is doing this to you. But then how can the head of HR be the one bullying you? And the thing is not even peculiar to me. She had brought in other people before them, people who were even her age, and she had treated them just as shabbily. And they also left within a short time.
So Isa, I'd like to tell you that because people are in HR, is not requisite to being good to be good mannered. No, it's not. It will shock you that most of the bullies you have are actually in HR. This happens amongst HR professionals.
Sandra, some of the bullies, please. This session is live.
Sorry,
because
I take that back.
Why I said this was
so,
because
let's focus. Let's focus on the subject matter.
Okay.
You can reach out to Sandra personally again so that the session, we need to wrap up actually in the next 3 minutes or less. All right.
Thank you, sir. I will do that. I'll connect on LinkedIn by the way. So,
fantastic.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Any other question or quick comments?
Thank you, Dr. Adeosun. I love the way you wrap it up. I think they should see each other one-on-one so that we won't degenerate into arguments here. You understand, sir? Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I love
Absolutely.
Cherry.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, I think I have a network. Thank you for the insightful session or presentation, rather. But I think I have the network issue. I sent on the chat box stating that how do one draft a template for a risk register in an HR department? I didn't really get that bit when she was presenting. So I don't know if she could throw more light on it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Priya. So essentially, there is no fixed template for a risk register. So depending on the scope of your operations, risk registers varies from company to company. And also depending on the size of your workforce, right? So I think my first feedback would be your risk register should essentially capture what the issue is, how severe, so there are numbers assigned to how severe a risk is identified, a risk that has been identified, usually between 1 to 5, 1 being the highest, right, and 1 being the least, right? Then there is also a component for likelihood, which also has numbers, right? So if we put 5, that the impact of this is going to be very detrimental to business, we put it at a 5. Then the next column is what is the likelihood that this would happen, right? 5 being most likely would happen, 1 being least likely to happen. Then you have a final column that says impact, and the impact is usually a multiplication of likelihood and severity. So if we put 5, meaning it is most likely to happen, and this is the impact, we'll have a 25, and a 25 will give you a critical measure or indicator, right? But you can research it to develop what suits your operations. But typically, you would have risk registers that have what the issue is, what are the mitigants, what have been done, or what do you have in place as a mitigant to fight against, to prevent that risk that has been identified from crystallizing. What is the severity, what is the likelihood, and what is the impact? So these are your typical headers for a risk register, but depending on your operation, you can have it more robust or you can have it lean. But this is as much as I can tell you now. I don't know if I've been able to shed light as you requested.
Yes, you have. Thank you so much. You have. Thank you,
You know.
Sandra.
Okay. So I think there are 2 hands up. Doctor, can we take those?
Yes, and that will be the end. The 2 hands.
Okay. So I think I see Priya and Feel Grace. So we'll take Priya. Is that Priya? Let me
Yeah.
see. Okay, Chinyere, please, and then Feel Grace. Chinyere, please go ahead.
Yeah, good evening, and thank you for the section. I just have 2 questions. One,
Okay.
paying remittance, is it the job of the HR or where you have auditor or accountants? But I know we do the calculation and send to them who remits. And in a situation where an organization does deductions and maybe they want to uh, do PI with the tax people and not remit all, would that be having any consequences on the HR? Yes, you're doing your normal calculation, deducting the payee, but the pension, you would do the remittance, but for the tax, is it the HR or the accountant? And if they are not paying in full when it comes to payee, since it's a state revenue, it doesn't have any implication on the business. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. So I'll just take your questions from the first one. So it is the job of the accounts department. So HR provides them with an updated list. They have access to the contract that speaks to what the salary or what was agreed, right? And then they are now able to apply pay based on the relief, consolidated, whatever, right? It is the job of the accounts department to remit these deductions because they have the employee TIN and they are also the one interfacing with the tax office. So they are expected to remit. But what I also do from time to time is I request for these schedules because there are some other remittance you need to do where they would require for you to submit your payee schedules, right? Even for our pension, I also process our certificate of compliance. So I also request these schedules for us to go and process these things. We would know the importance of this when the company wants to do, maybe go and raise funds in the capital market. Because there are some funds you cannot access in the capital market if you do not have certificate of compliance for some of these things. Even tax clearance certificate for your employees, sometimes it is required for you to present those certificate of compliance for pension before you are able to access some fund or carry out some, like I've shared, acquisition. In our case, we wanted to go to the capital market and they required as part of assessing those funds that the certificate of compliance for pension remittance was provided. So it is the job of the accounts department. So where these monies are deducted and it is not remitted, as HR, my advice would be to formally document your observation with the internal audit in copy. Because if an employee is going to go and make a lawsuit, when they come, the first engagement would, the letter would come. And when it comes, guess who they will send it to? They'll say, go and give it to HR. They won't take it to finance, or would the MD sit down and be addressing letters from the industrial court? No, they'll say, go and give HR. So it will come down to your table. So if you notice any discrepancy, if you notice that they are not abiding by what has been, you need to call it out. I'm not saying that they might take your feedback, but call it out and let it be documented that this was your observation. Because the employees are watching, they know when you're doing your job and when you're not. You need to call it out, right? And when you want to leave, depending on how, call it out in writing, exactly. Document it via email. Put a copy to your personal email. Because at the end of the day, your duty of care, and I don't know if you're a CM professional, it will be called out. If somebody go and report you to CIPM that you've been deducting from their salaries alongside the account department, you've not been remitting, CIPM will call you. They will call you, right? So please document it, call it out to the best of your ability. And depending on how bad it is, as a duty of care, you might just want to go to any of the regulatory agencies to say this is your observation, you've called it out, this is your evidence, and you ensure that you are living with clean hands. You were not part of such acts committed by the employer. I don't know if I've been able to address your question.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. So I think our final question is from Phil Grace. Phil Grace, please.
Good evening, Sandra, and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for your expository session with regards to due diligence. So in response to Chinyere's question, you responded to a part of the question I was going to ask, but I would still ask. I was going to say that what if in doing your due diligence, you are sure that this is for the benefit of the company, but it's not appreciated or is not perceived as important? And your response to Chinyere said, always document. So that would now save you as HR. I just want to clear that part. And then on the other hand, you mentioned about sorry, I've forgotten my second question, but in the process of answering Chinyere's question, I think I got my answer. And that's it's just documentation. But it's frustrating when you're always trying to reach out to management or senior colleagues and is not appreciated or is not seen as important. At some point you just want to relapse or just let things be. So what would your advice be in that regard? Thank you.
Yes. So, okay, so doctor just said you should move to where you are celebrated and not tolerated. Absolutely, absolutely. So as HR, part of our role is to provide advisory. So you're not coming across like you are witch hunting or you are better than everyone. You're just giving advisory. You're just giving guidance. And what I do from time to time is I'll print out this act. I'll print out the payee, whatever. I'll print it and attach to whatever I am writing so that there is a backing to whatever advisory I am putting forward. I also like to read PwC's write-up on some of these contemporary issues. So once I print out whatever it is that the government has said, I get some of this PwC write-up, I attach it to give it a more robust view on whatever I am guiding, because sometimes they genuinely don't know. Some of these businesses, it might just be someone who took over a business, maybe a family-owned business, or someone who has just left, got some money and said, okay, let me start my own business. And they might not understand these intricacies. So when you give your feedback or you call out, you're not calling out to the mindset of you're trying to witch hunt or you're trying to make them look bad. No, you're just giving guidance. Like, oh, this is what I observed. This is what we can do. Even if we are not able to do the entire remittance at once, are we able to start with 6 months and pay 6 monthly, right? So Dr. Adelshaw has just written is the, and let me see that. I can't see your comments, sir. Oh, there are lots of questions in the comment section I didn't see. Oh my God. Okay, so he said here that is the failure to comply ignorance, lack of ability to pay, or blatant unwillingness? So to be honest, sir, it's different case for different entities. For some entities, it's just a blatant unwillingness to pay. They would rather go and fix this remittance somewhere so they can earn an interest. I've seen that. They take this money, they fix it somewhere with an investment bank so they can actually earn on it. I was shocked, right? And then some is just sheer ignorance, because we have some mindset that we can get a lot of things, get away with a lot of things. But we see what Mr. Oyewale is doing, right? I just read this morning that if you do not file for your tax by March 2026, it will be in contravention of compliance, and then you would have to face the wrath of the law. So to be honest, sometimes it's just ignorance, but like we know, ignorance is not an excuse. And that's why as business owners, you are encouraged to hire as much experts as possible to guide you. And as HR, we are experts we are advisors. We need to keep providing guidance. And where you feel like your input is not being valued, please develop your exit strategy. Like Doctor has said, don't stay where you are tolerated, because you will never grow. And if you are working in a place where you are not earning well, or you are not growing, your capacity is not being stretched, then you're really not doing anything there. You're just being tolerated, to be honest. They are the ones tolerating you. So if you're in a place where you are earning well, but you're not learning anywhere, it's still okay to have an exit strategy. If you are in a place where you are providing input and is not taken, it's still okay to have an exit strategy. Right? It might not be easy. I'm not saying just go and resign. No, have a strategy. Be intentional. Build capacity. Get a mentor. You are already here. Pay attention. Personally, I joined these sessions. Initially, I didn't know what it was about. I'm like, okay, let me see what's going on here. And I started joining. I have my notepad. Every time I join, I am writing something. I must have one thing I want to try. Get a mentor. Escalate where need be. Copy the internal audit. Don't take it down alone. Let the internal audit know what is going on, because at the end of the day, when the external auditors come, they will start with the internal audit unit. So copy them. The mail trail will show. And whatever is not documented did not happen. So whatever feedback, whatever advisory, make sure it is accurate, make sure it is factual, and make sure it is applicable to whatever scenario you're trying to address, and make sure it is documented. I think that brings me to the end of my feedback. I hope I've been able to shed light and bring value to the question.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. On the strength of this presentation tonight, I would like to document my request publicly that you are coming again. The choice is now, is it February or March? But please, please come again. This is insightful.
Absolutely.
I can see this is my best session this year so far. Thank you so much. Please come again very, very quickly. Ladies and gentlemen, please let's unmute and let's celebrate Sandra Onwalutu. This has been profound.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you very much,
Sandra, for everything.
Sandra.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for having